Hello and welcome back to the semifinals of the World Championship in Through the Ages. Today we are taking a look at the third game from Group 1. And in Group 1, at the moment in the lead is Martin Pecheur with a win and a second place in the two four-player games that we already saw, while for both Plunderteig and Eepogi, the start didn't go that great, Plunderteig being at 3 points, Eepogi at 1, so for both of them it could now be very important finishing before Martin in order to just stay in touch with the lead and remain with good chances for the first position. And now without further ado, let's take a look at the game. First of all, as always, we are taking a look at the leaders and wonders in this game, and we have a lot of theater synergy. Chaplin, Marlene, Fleming and Hollywood are there, no internet though. We also have Churchill for the military, there is no Manhattan Project, no Gandhi, we have no Pierre, but there is Steve Jobs and Marie Curie for a little bit of lab synergy, also the space flight is there. We have some really strong H2 wonders, Ocean Liner, Railroad, Harvard College. There's also Suez Canal and James Cook, so some big colonization payoff. We have Ocean Liner with Maria, James Watt with the Railroad, some culture leaders with Shakespeare and Darwin, also both Newton and Nobel are in the game. We have no military action leader in H2, but two of them are in H1 with Jan Žižka and Joan of Arc. We have Nostradamus and Barbarossa to help with the strength. We have Columbus and also Barbarossa for some colony synergy, and Gutenberg, but no, or actually both Gutenberg and Leonardo. We have both the science wonders with Universitas and Silk Road. We have Himeji Castle, but no Great Wall, and also Machu Picchu and the Taj Mahal are there. Also, not a lot of wonders, and actually also not the most leaders in the row, interestingly. So those are the HA wonders and those are the HA leaders that could come out of the deck. Martin is in the first position and he just takes Sun Tzu. He actually likes Sun Tzu quite a lot, and also I have gone for Sun Tzu more recently. And when I made my tier list, Martin was not happy with me putting Sun Tzu in C tier. And he put them in A tier in his own list, I think. No, but even back then, when I maybe valued Sun Tzu a bit less highly, I still would have thought, I think, in this position that it's the best to go for him. He's playing in first position, there's some nice synergy in the game, and also with Clio, he maybe doesn't have a clear path on how he can use her ability every turn. Eepogi will then just grab the Colosseum, interestingly. Maybe in his position I would have been willing to go for Clio plus a yellow card like Urban Growth and then just gamble on getting a wonder, but I guess it can just backfire a bit. But I think maybe I would have taken the shot, but having the Colosseum is maybe also fine. Plunderteig will then go for Clio, and instead of taking two yellows together with her, will go for the Colossus. And I might have also gone for the Colossus rather in Eepogi's shoes instead of the Colosseum, but Colosseum of course also not being bad, also for colonization and stuff with the third military action, but Plunderteig now goes for the Colossus. That means that Engineering Genius will stay on two civil actions. For Martin, he goes for Sun Tzu, builds a mine, increases his population, and then takes the urban growth, which he can use on the second lab. He lets Hippocrates stay on two civil actions for Eepogi, so let's see if he is willing to pay an additional civil action for any leader. And he is not, maybe just waiting for Boudicca's or Aristotle at the next turn, or could maybe even go for Nostradamus directly if he is still in the row. Plunderteig takes an early iron for 3 civil actions. No, a move that we see more and more recently, and the strong players are willing to pay quite a heavy price in order to secure an early copy of iron. I'm not totally certain though if I would be willing to do it in this position. He's delaying Cleo's resources. Maybe he will build a third mine now and will then be able to use Cleo in the lab at the next turn. I guess that could be a possibility, but he could have maybe also just had a very solid turn with building the lab, going for Cleo, increasing pop, taking rich land. So if I would be willing to go for the iron for that much in his position, where he doesn't have any additional science production, to get the iron going more quickly. And the same is true for Martin. Maybe the iron is not worth as much, at least I think. But he has the copy of iron. Let's see if he still can put it to good use. Martin seeds and opens the development of crafts. He will build a second lab, interestingly without the urban growth. And the reason for that aren't corruption issues. Maybe he thought already about corruption for the next turn, but at the moment he would still have corruption. so interesting that he didn't use the urban growth here. Don't know exactly what the reason behind it was. Maybe, I guess, with him not taking a wonder, he might be eyeing that Silk Road that is coming down the road, even together with the Masonry, and maybe he's gambling on getting even an additional resource out of this urban growth at some point. I think that could be the reason for that. I don't really see anything else. Or I guess maybe it has to do with the Silk Road, but also actually with corruption and the Silk Road, because if he goes for the Silk Road at the next turn, now that he didn't use the urban growth, he actually can build the first step of the Silk Road to get out of corruption, which would not be possible if he would have used the urban growth. So if his plan is indeed to go for the Silk Road, and he is as much of a Silk Road lover as I am, then yeah, it makes sense first of all, that the urban growth might be able you might be able to use it for an additional resource, and it might be easier to get out of corruption next turn. Whoops. Then it's Eepogi's turn. He won't go for Nostradamus directly, instead grabs Aristotle, but still takes Nostradamus in hand. So he is basically willing to invest in additional civil action here in order to get the additional Aristotle science. Could have also saved the civil action and maybe done something else like building the step and having Nostradamus already running, getting some infos, maybe being able to start seeding immediately. So Aristotle has to put in some work now, otherwise I think that could potentially could turn out that it will be a mistake at the end. But of course, if he is managing to take 3 or 4 techs, then the science this early in the game might still be valuable enough to not save the civil action and not go for Nostradamus already. Plunderteig goes for Cleo this turn, builds the second lab, can start using Cleo's resources now, and then he just increases his population again. There's no Pierre in the game, so Bread and Circus is maybe not worth as much, and he's just rather civil action efficient. Matar Seeds opens the development of Warfare, a development that he can't really take, and now we might see the reasoning behind him not taking the urban growth. He is able to get out of corruption just by building a step of the Silk Road, takes the Masonry and develops it. A civil action efficient can finish the Silk Road at the next turn. I think that is quite a strong start for him, getting the Silk Road as a first wonder, and even together with the Masonry, I think is something that you can be very happy about. But also very heads up play by him. Not using the urban growth at the turn before, foreseeing that that actually could cause corruption with his plan of going for the Silk Road. Now it's Eepogi's turn. He will score the first science with Aristotle by taking the irrigation. Is actually now willing to go for Nostradamus. I mean, I'm not certain if that was really worth it going for Aristotle here, if he is now going for Nostradamus that quickly. He could have been 1 civil action ahead. Of course, he has now 1 additional science, and science is extremely valuable in the early game. I guess he is also seeing now that no tech at all, actually, apart from the drama, is coming down the row. So, of course, if there would be now Code of Laws, monarchies and stuff coming down the row, he could have just kept Aristotle a bit longer. So it could have, of course, turned out to be differently, but yeah, now he has basically paid 1 civil action for 1 science and also delayed Nostradamus and the value that he could have gotten from him. He will then just finish the Colosseum, gets more draws from now on. Now it's Plunderteig's turn. He will also finish his wonder, finishes the Colossus, and takes the Machu Picchu. He has the iron in hand, could still have a shot at getting the second copy of Irrigation, so that could turn out to be a strong wonder for him, and also he has more opportunities to use Cleo's resources. The next turn he could do 1 upgrade and build the first step. Matar Seeds opens the development of Civil Life. Will use it to increase his population with a 1 food discount. Takes Columbus in hand, either has already a strong colony drawn, or with Sans, who is confident that he will draw a colony at some point, and with the Suez and James Cook being in the game, Columbus I think is just extremely valuable. So he takes him here. He takes the urban growth, and I guess he will finish the Silk Road. Yes, he finishes the Silk Road, and I think having that early is certainly quite strong. Now it's Eepogi's turn. He seeds with Nostradamus, opens the development of markets, takes additional resource from it, increases his population, taking the breakthrough, and then the Image Castle. Will he build 2 warriors to get out of corruption? I guess he will. The event deck is also shortly about to flip. Has a Legion tactic, makes himself the strongest for now. Then it's Plunderteig's turn. He doesn't see it. He will use the development of Civil Life to develop the Iron, goes for one step, builds the first, for one upgrade, builds the first step of the Machu Picchu, has 2 civil actions left, and is interestingly willing to take the Monarchy here for 2 civil actions. A bit costly. Maybe the alternatives on 1 civil action are not the greatest, and I guess with the Colossus having a way to get a 3rd military action could be nice, and also with Machu Picchu you certainly want to make sure to not be stuck on 4 civil actions for too long, so maybe just making sure that he gets some important stuff going that will not chase with his wonders. Marta Seeds, with that the event deck flips, the development of planning is revealed, and the options for that are development of agriculture, science, and settlement. Marta has seeded 4 out of the 5 events, only Eepogi has seeded another one. He reveals the medieval army, a strong tactic to upgrade, and that probably means that he will grab those knights. He makes space in his hand using the urban growth 1, again not using the urban growth A. Let's see if he will still find a way to use that. Let's also see again what is the reasoning behind going for the urban growth 1. Maybe he wants to build 2 knights or something. He will take the knights, he will develop the knights, builds 1. He doesn't build the second one. Then again, maybe he could have used the urban growth A. Maybe he was afraid that actually the urban growth 1 could be stuck quite a long time in his hand. Yeah, but an interesting choice here, not using the urban growth A when he had a chance. And I guess he couldn't have built 2 knights anyway, because he was restrained on military actions, is now the strongest. Could be an indicator that he has seeded some strength events in there. Now it's Eepogi's turn, he seeds, and there's indeed a strength event, but Marta will actually also lose a civil action because of the Nostradamus bonus from Eepogi. Eepogi will go for the Code of Laws, has a lot of science saved up, will develop it, increases population, and then take the rich land. Plunderteig seeds and opens the scientific breakthrough, which gives Marta the most science with having the Silk Road. Nonetheless, with all of the additional science gained from the scientific breakthrough, and I guess also maybe the development of planning, the development of science, Plunderteig has actually already in this turn enough science to develop the monarchy peacefully, and then finish the Machu Picchu, going up to 6 resources, again using the resource of Cleo. Being a bit low in science now again, but having some solid production. He is actually willing to skip the irrigation here. What did he... I guess he had only 2 civil actions. Yeah. Then of course it's tough not finishing Machu, maybe even having corruption potentially, and instead taking the irrigation would be extremely expensive, and so he just rather wants to get the production going quickly. Then Marta seeds, opens the reds, which will be quite bad, which is quite bad for Plunderteig. He will take the Code of Laws, has some additional science, also thanks to the event, and has enough science to develop it. Takes the alchemy, and this turn will use the urban growth A in order to build another religion for 1 resource. Keeps actually Sun Tzu for another turn. Maybe he still wants to get the additional draws. I think it could be likely that the age ends before his next turn, but yeah, if he has no colony in hand, maybe it could be worth it getting the 2 additional draws from Sun Tzu here. Also maybe the additional strength. And there's the foray revealed, giving Marta and Eepogi some additional food and resources. Eepogi has now quite a lot of resources saved up, and he maybe just goes for 3 iron upgrades, leaves himself with just enough resource to finish Shimichi at the next turn, so that's certainly strong, getting those upgrades done very quickly. Plunderteig goes for Barbarossa this turn. That of course makes it even more hurtful that he got hit by the reds, that even now, after having lost the food, he is willing to go for Barbarossa, uses Cleo's resources to build a religion this turn, goes for an upgrade, and then takes the knights, and soon can start using Barbarossa, maybe the next turn for a warrior, and then soon, if he has enough science, to go for knights, and with the bit of additional food income from Machu Picchu, Barbarossa might still be able to do some activations. Now H1 will indeed end and H2 starts. Marta will offer an open borders agreement pact to Eepogi, who will benefit from it with having Nostradamus, but he has already 3 military actions, and Barbarossa would have benefited from it as well. maybe even more with still having to build a lot of military. Martin this turn starts going for the alchemy. The upgrades are relatively cheap thanks to having the masonry. Starts some very solid science production, takes the rich land, and with that is prepared to nicely get into coal. Also, he doesn't go for Columbus yet. The pact, I think, is very valuable for him. Who knows, maybe he even drew it with the additional cards from keeping Sun Tzu, which I think would have made it worth it, because now he has an even better shot at maybe finding a strong H2 colony for Columbus, so that will be interesting to see if he finds a good colony for Columbus here. Eepogi Seeds opens the rebellion and loses 2 civil actions, certainly a bit annoying for him. Maybe after finishing Imeji he could have otherwise taken a copy of cannons, or maybe get Nobel going, who is quite strong that early. Now he still finishes Imeji, gets out of corruption like that, and then takes the cultural heritage, which could allow him to get into either Republic or Conmon at the next turn, so it could turn out to be quite a valuable cultural heritage here. Plunderteig seeds and opens the new deposits, giving Plunderteig and Eepogi the most, while Martin has not the greatest resource production yet. Plunderteig will actually go for Swordsman, wants to use Barbarossa on an H1 unit already. Let's see if he also has a tactic. He is quite low in science, and I'm at the moment, I'm not certain how nicely he will be able to invest the resource of the Machu Picchu nicely, but at least he will get a lot of help with the science now with going for Nobel, which I think is certainly the correct choice, with being that low in science and needing the science very much in order to make the Machu Picchu work. Interestingly, he is taking the cartography, knows of course that the Suez is in there, and maybe has even seeded a colony himself, has also the Colossus. Martin seeds now, and there are some interesting things coming down the road. Harvard College, Conmon, Ocean Liner Service, Strategy. So let's see which player will get which cards. Martin opens the Good Harvest, giving Plunderteig the most food, making a little bit up for the Reds. Sadly, Barbarossa is now already gone. And Martin, interestingly, goes for the Harvard College here. He could have taken the Ocean Liner as well. Maybe that would have made it a bit more difficult for him to get some other stuff done. Let's see what he will do with the actions. I think taking Engineering Genius, taking Cannons, or electing Columbus could all be very strong candidates for the last 2 civil actions. First of all, he builds a unit to not have 4 corruption. He elects Columbus, and he takes the Engineering Genius, being a bit greedy with the cannon. But maybe in order to be able to finish that Harvard College nicely, the Engineering Genius just very important. Maybe he has already drawn a strong colony by now. So yeah, I think it is a risk that you maybe can take in order to just get a bit more economical value. At least he has the Swordsman in hand and can maybe hope to get a second copy of cannons. I mean, Eepogi might now get the cannons, and then Plunderteig is playing in front of him. Maybe he will regret it, but the Engineering Genius with the Silk Road will just give him 5 resources, and with being on bronze mines, maybe that's something that you can't miss out, and maybe he could have not elected Columbus, taking the cannons, but it heavily depends on if he has already a strong colony that he wants to get going as quickly as possible. With not taking Harvard and taking the Engineering Genius, Ocean Liner Service will drop down into the 2 civil action area for Eepogi, so I suspect that he will take it. First of all, he seeds, opens the vast territory, and Plunderteig is at the end able to win it. Sends a swordsman 2 cards away, winning that colony for only 1 unit is quite strong. Now maybe with the Good Harvest and the vast territory, he regrets it maybe a little bit, having already elected Nobel, not having Barbarossa any longer, but I think especially probably he didn't have knowledge about those events, and even if he didn't have knowledge about both of them being revealed before his next turn, so even then I think electing Nobel was the correct choice. Eepogi this turn will take the Ocean Liner Service, and he also is willing to skip the cannons, so we have a very rare side here. A copy of cannons will actually be discarded, so now the 3 players will actually be competing over 1 last copy of cannons, so it will be interesting to see which player will get that copy at the end. Eepogi is willing to miss out on the cannons in order to fix his corruption. Who knows, maybe he has already a fitting tactic where he doesn't need the cannons. Plunderteig will increase his population, rebuilds a swordsman, increases his population again, takes the journalism. I think that is a very strong card to invest some Machu Picchu resources, and then he also goes for 1 more upgrade, has corruption this turn, but with the journalism he could even build 2 journalisms at the next turn. He might boost his economy and also his cultural production by quite a lot soon. Marta uses Columbus, gets the developed territory 1 actually, so no jackpot for him with drawing an H2 colony. Nonetheless, getting this colony I think will give him quite a big of a boost, because thanks to the additional science, now he will be able to go into the Conmon this turn. So maybe seeing this Conmon coming down the row could have been also a reason why he really thought that electing Columbus was a high priority and was willing to skip the cannons for it. He will replace Columbus immediately with Newton, which I think is a good idea. He will be able to save some civil action to generate even more science. Now he will definitely go for Conmon, can maybe then finish the Harvard College with the engineering genius, building the last step for 0 resources. He has now the very nice Silk Road and Harvard College combination ongoing here. And then he takes the strategy as so much science that he can easily go for that. And interestingly, takes the revolutionary idea over the breakthrough. I guess he will have a lot of civil action, so maybe just being able to use 1 civil action for 1 additional science over the breakthrough, maybe could be worth it. Still, the breakthrough feels like the more efficient card to me. I don't know if he has a clear plan on why he might need the 1 additional science already the next turn. I guess he might want to go into colon strategy, for example. For that he is now at the next turn at 10, now with the Rev idea plus the Silk Road bonus at 15. I guess the revolutionary idea could allow him to get into strategy and coal at the next turn. Maybe that played a part in his decision making, I don't know. Eepogi seeds and opens the Reign of Terror, which will cost Martin a population. Eepogi is now also able to get into a government form, has now 8 civil actions, which is quite strong. Finishes the Ocean Liner, is I think in a very solid position, but of course also Martin with that enormous science production is in a strong position. Eepogi will now increase his population, takes the breakthrough and a scientific method. Also builds even another warrior, doesn't take the rifleman, so the player's being a bit greedy so far with skipping the military text. Plunderteig seeds and opens the Crusades, Eepogi getting some additional culture while Martin loses some. That should put Eepogi now a bit in the culture lead, I think, but Martin actually still being relatively close behind. We have now 2 H1 events coming, seeded 1 by Eepogi, 1 by Plunderteig, and then 1 event by each player from H2. Plunderteig, let's see if he will just even build 2 journalisms this turn, but there's actually now also the last copy of cannons coming down the row. If one of the players has a strong tactic with cannons, now maybe a high price has to be paid. Plunderteig goes for 1 journalism. He could now just take the cannons with the 3 civil actions, but instead he wants to get a 2nd journalism going. Maybe he has already something like Classic Army or Conquistadors, or is willing to take the risk, and then also takes the architecture to maybe build further journalisms even cheaper. Martin plays the revolutionary idea, goes for the strategy. There's no coal on the row, but he can still go for 2 techs, goes for the strategy. Interestingly, he I guess corruption reasons. I was wondering why he used the Rev idea for the Silk Road bonus, while maybe he needs additional resources more, but yeah, if he would have saved 1 more resource, he would have had corruption, so he needs to do it like this. He then takes the reserves and also the rifleman. Is also not willing to take the cannons for 2, but at least has taken the rifleman. Eepogi seeds, the uncertain borders are revealed. He wins another strength event. Plunderteig will lose a yellow token. That makes it that Eepogi has maybe a little bit longer, no issues with famine, but I guess he can fix those famine issues with irrigation if he finds the time to develop that before the end of the age, or also the science especially. But I guess at the next turn he might be able to go for both scientific method and the irrigation, or he actually develops the irrigation already this turn, can then go for the scientific method at the next turn, even goes for an upgrade already, interestingly, maybe to just use the civil action effectively, and thanks to the urban growth has still enough resource to go for 2 upgrades into scientific method at the next turn. Plunderteig offers an international trade agreement pact to Eepogi, getting additional food while Eepogi gets additional resources. Plunderteig going for the justice system, I think that's an important upgrade for a civilization. helping him with the corruption, with his big Machu Picchu production, while also, of course, getting more civil actions going. He then takes the breakthrough and also a copy of Opera, wants to be able to produce some culture, and there's really some theater synergy in H3, as we saw at the beginning of the game. Marta cedes and opens the inhabited territory, Eepogi being able to win that for 2 warriors, so he has to pay a bit of a price. Did he take the cannons? Yes, he took the cannons. Marta will this turn go for the coal, can go for 1 upgrade. Actually, if he wanted to, he could have even gone for 2 upgrades. If he would have taken the efficient upgrade and used it with the Harvard College. He has the very nice combination here. Goes for, but decides to go for another food upgrade, but I guess he will also go for a coal upgrade, will indeed take the efficient upgrade, go for a very cheap upgrade to coal, takes the navigation, and that might still help him if there are some colonies coming and a wave of nationalism. Eepogi cedes and opens the Cold War, so Plunderteig again misses out on the big strength event after already getting hit by the uncertain borders. That those events, him being just a little bit behind in strength, is starting to hurt him here. Eepogi now has more than enough science to go for scientific method, even that much that he can also go for the architecture. I think the Cold War reveal here being very strong for Eepogi. Otherwise he wouldn't have been able to go for both of those techs, and that will save him now quite a bunch of resources. He will he go for a 3rd upgrade. He is willing to, with having additional population from Ocean Liner, build an additional lab. Will he go even for a 3rd upgrade, or does he rather want to save up some resources? He wants to save up some resources. Also goes for James Cook, interestingly. Shakespeare maybe doesn't work that nicely for him, and then there would have been only Darwin and Maria left. I guess Maria could have been nice, but maybe Eepogi rather wanted to have the civil actions to get a new leader already out of the way. Maybe could also be a sign he had Nostradamus up to this point that there are some more colonies coming, so that the colonizing ability of James Cook could actually still get relevant. Plunderteig cedes, and the civil unrest is revealed, but no one has any unhappy workers. He develops the knights this turn. There are cavalrymen on the row, but maybe doesn't have the civil actions to justify taking them for 2 with already having the knights. He starts going for some farm upgrades, is willing to upgrade a 2nd farm as well, even though that already produced 2 food with the Machu Picchu, but he has more than enough resources to justify the 2nd upgrade. Only the civil action could be questionable, but I guess the resources spent also helped him getting out of corruption. And now H3 will start, so maybe a time to take a look at the overview. Plunderteig has, production-wise, a very strong economy going now. 8 resource production, a lot of food production, still a somewhat healthy yellow bank, has those journalisms going, so I think that is looking nicely. What could be an issue for him, and a thing that he is lacking, is the civil actions. Eepogi has 8, Marta has 7 plus Newton and a lot of science production, so that might hinder Plunderteig to maybe further invest his resource efficiently, but maybe he can build another journalism soon, has the operas, is prepared for all of those culture leaders, the Hollywood, so he's not in a bad position. Military-wise, he could have some problems as only swordsmen and knights, so that is an area where he could get punished. Eepogi is also a very solid economy, and his advantage, which maybe makes his position better compared to Plunderteig's, is that he actually has quite a bit of a culture lead. Over 30 culture more than Plunderteig, has 7 science production, has the architecture already developed. He is better set up in regards of the military techs that he is having, has the ocean liner, thanks to the Pact 7 resource production, so his position looks good. Also Michi Castle to defend himself, I think, or potentially go in the offensive. With him having the culture lead, I think he has a very solid position here. The position of Marta Pêcheur is also quite strong, I would say. He got this early Silk Road, built the Harvard College in addition to that, and has Newton with alchemy, so his science production is extremely strong. Culture production wise, he's also fine, even though being a bit behind Eepogi. And if he continues... Hello, sadly I have to interrupt my former self here. Well, what happened?
the part of the video that you listened to so far, I recorded before I went to holidays. The problem was that when I recorded the video, it at some point, and it was exactly at that point where we are right now, the recording stopped accidentally without me noticing. I talked about the game until the very end, only to notice that sadly the last part didn't get recorded, which is of course quite sad. I then actually immediately afterwards decided to re-record the missing part, but again the recording accidentally stopped, and then I didn't have enough time to again record it because I went off to holidays. At the end of the holidays, I got quite sick and I now was laying in bed for more than a week. Now I'm finally getting better again and I'm almost well now, but you can maybe still hear it a little bit in my voice. And yeah, here we are now, almost 3 weeks later. And now we will give it another try, I would say, so that we can bring this game to a close. And yeah, so let's continue where we left off. Of course, you have to note that now I, of course, already have seen the game continue. So from this part on, sadly, I now know the outcome and I also know what happened, even though now that there is so much time gone before since my last recording, I actually don't remember any details any longer about how this game went on. So maybe I will be surprised again for the second time. All right. I think we left off when I was just talking about how I considered positions, and I was just talking about Martha's position, that he has lots of civil action, some extremely strong science production with Newton, a nice Silk Road Harvard combination. Soon we'll have also some strong resource production going, so he has a very strong economy, is a little bit behind in culture compared to Eepogi, who maybe has a slightly weaker economy. Yeah. And after those evaluations, I of course in my original recording that then didn't get recorded, I made a guess on which how I thought the game would end. And back then I thought that probably Plunderteig has the most challenging position because of his low civil actions and also being behind in culture. So I guessed him at the last. Then between Martha and Eepogi, it was extremely close for me. It was basically a coin toss. At the end, I went with guessing Eepogi as the winner and Martha as the second place. But it was really a coin toss. I thought maybe Eepogi has already a bit of a culture lead. He has the Michi Castle to protect himself. Will have lots of population with the ocean liner, and maybe that will just be enough to protect himself. On the other hand, Martha could really explode with having a strong Newton game. But my guess at the end was Eepogi the winner, Martha the second place, and Plunderteig as the last place. Alright, but then let's continue and see how the game ends. There is actually a war happening now. Martha declares a war over territory against Plunderteig. He reveals the classic army tactic. That war definitely came a bit as a surprise for me, but he has the classic army tactic. With that he is weakest, he can play the wave of nationalism with the Silk Road bonus for 7 additional resources, goes for the organized religion, goes for the navigation, develops the rifleman, and then, yeah, goes for fulfilling a classic army is now at 23 strength, and with those additional yellow tokens, of course, his position might get quite strong, but of course, on the other hand, he is maybe sacrificing a little bit of economical development for that, but also Eepogi, who is not part of the war, probably has to respond to that, so there, he maybe can steal some yellows, so with that, I think this war should have quite an impact. Eepogi seeds and opens the popularization of science, which is relatively close, but gives Martha the most culture. Eepogi has to respond to the strength push from Martha, goes for the cavalryman, builds one, upgrades his last lab, is now also at a very strong science production. He gets the first copy of Air Forces, that might really help him defend himself and maybe keeping the culture lead. He also adopts the medieval army tactic. Maybe he needs the additional strength to be able to defend against an aggression. Maybe is willing to sacrifice some draws in order to achieve that. Now let's see how Plunderteig can defend. First of all, he will seed, and he opens some additional signs. The knowledge of the ancients is revealed, which gives Eepogi the most and Martar the least signs. Plunderteig has the chance to take rockets here. He missed out on the artillery text from H2, but now gets an early copy of rockets. Is going for that immediately. Let's see if he has a nice tactic to fulfill. And he actually goes for 2 rockets. And as you can see, he still has 2 unhappy workers. So let's see if he somehow gets out of an uprising again, or if he is actually willing to commit. He reveals the fortifications tactic. With that is a 23 strength. He takes the frugality. With that he has now used all of his civil and military actions, and yeah, he will have an uprising this turn. He will be able to tie in the war. He doesn't lose any yellow tokens, but he will lose his whole production, 8 resources, 8 science, 5 culture, 5 food. That is some extremely big cost. So yeah, looking at it, I'm not totally sure if it is the right call to go for that uprising. Losing some yellows, of course, also not ideal, especially because he doesn't have a happy face solution. So he would have some really big issues if he loses some yellows and doesn't have an uprising as well. So probably a tough situation for him. But now he is willing to pay the very big cost of having an uprising in order to not get any yellow tokens stolen. Of course, a bit unfortunate for Martar, who did some investments, a little bit of sacrificed a little bit of economical development in order to get that war going, and now he damaged Plunderteig, of course, but he doesn't gain any yellow tokens for himself, which maybe weakens his position against Eepogi a little bit. So the uprising is happening. Martar steals no yellow tokens. The war is a tie. He tries a spy against Eepogi, who can defend just sacrificing a warrior and 2 defense cards. So probably thanks to the additional strength from copying the tactic. Martar then takes the efficient upgrade, uses the rich land in order to go for 1 coal upgrade, takes another efficient upgrade, increases his population, builds another knight to remain the strongest, indicating that maybe there are some strength events coming, takes the engineering, the urban growth, and yeah, I'm not sure, did he also take the rich land? I think not, so maybe he actually also could have potentially used the efficient upgrade with the Harvard College immediately on another coal upgrade, but maybe doesn't want to commit the population or just wanted to have all of those cards available for him. Now it's Eepogi's turn. He will go for Marlene. He doesn't have any operas yet, but can maybe build some at some point. Has also the architecture to make them cheaper, but for the short term, maybe Eepogi is going for Marlene here in order to get a bit more strength. Has now already 2 medieval army tactics ongoing, and with building another cavalryman, he has now 3 plus an air force, is now 28 strength, and out of the sudden the strongest. Takes the revolutionary idea and the computers, but has invested a lot of resources into that. Also loses a bit of culture production that he had from James Cook. Plunderteig takes the military build-up. Even with losing no yellow tokens, he still has some big happy face issues. And let's see how he will fix those. He destroys a lab, he destroys a swordsman, and actually takes the multimedia for 3 civil actions, which is quite an interesting take. He has already journalisms, and yeah, it's so probably it's partly a denial. I mean, Martar has Newton. He could, with the urban growth and the engineering, relatively cheaply build a multimedia, get his economy upgraded even more, get a culture boost, maybe also be prepared for a nice leader like Fleming, who maybe also could result in a nice Hollywood at the end. So maybe it is a denial from Martar. Maybe Plunderteig wants to have this option available for himself with maybe a Fleming and a big Hollywood. Of course, Plunderteig is in a tough position now after having the uprising. Maybe he has to take some risks, but it feels expensive to take the multimedia, and he could have also, for example, taken a patriotism. The additional military action and resource for the military could be quite important to maybe be able to defend himself. So an interesting choice here from Plunderteig. Martar seeds and opens the developed territory. He's also the one able to win it. He went for the navigation, and now that pays off. He is able to win the colony for just a knight. Has now 28 science saved up. He will just go for the oil now. He has that much science, and it only costs him a civil action to take it, not to develop it. With Newton, that he can just easily go from coal to oil. Upgrades his last bronze mines with the efficient upgrade using the Silk Road bonus. Interestingly, not using the one from H2, instead using the one from H3, maybe so that he can use the one from H2 either on the upgrade from coal to oil, or maybe from religion to organized religion, where there are no more than 3 resources required anyway. And now that he is going for oil, he also is willing to go for Marie Curie, but before electing her, he will develop the engineering, elects Marie Curie now, increases his population, builds the rifleman, and with that is a 27 strength, also takes the engineering genius. So he has now an even stronger economical setup, 11 resource production, 11 science production, and also thanks to the cult from Marie Curie, he is actually coming closer to Eepogi. So at that point I thought that maybe my guess of thinking that Eepogi will win might not come true, because Martar really has some strong stuff going, and the culture lead from Eepogi is not getting bigger. He seeds, reveals the international negotiations. He's actually the strongest, so he can take advantage of that. Will make the decision of stealing 3 resources, which still leaves him 2 resources short of going for 2 operas already this turn, but he can go for 1, and the resources certainly will be helpful for him at some point. He takes the military theory, which will be extremely important for him with being on Republic. Develops the military theory actually already, is now also a bit threatening in regards of the strength, takes the reserves, and upgrades 1 more farm to irrigation, so that he can also increase his population normally at the next turn if he wants to. Is there also a red cross in the game? Yes, there's actually also a red cross, so he's also accumulating a bit more food with the reserves. He could play it for food, is at 9 food, and then could take the red cross and at least build 3 steps if he wants to. Plunderteig opens another colony, the wealthy territory. This time Plunderteig is actually able to win it, but he pays a heavy price for it. He sends a rocket and a swordsman away, as well as a colonization card. Those units are actually already costing more than the 9 resources, but of course the swordsman he probably doesn't need any longer to fulfill any tactics. Still, it feels a bit expensive, but maybe it helps him a bit with the happy faces, getting that swordsman back into the yellow bank, and the resources could still make a difference now that he only needs to rebuild some rockets and doesn't need to rebuild the swordsman. He gets the second copy of Air Forces, meaning Martar misses out on them, which limits his military potential by a bit, because he is on Classic Army, which is somewhat limiting without the Air Forces, so that could be a problem for him. Plunderteig takes the Air Forces, develops them, builds 1, increases his population 2 times, builds another rocket, it is now at 29 strength, and with that is somewhat safe from aggressions, even though he would still need 1 defense card to defend against Eepogi. Martar seeds an impact into the deck, another colony is revealed, so a lot of H2 colonies we have here, and this time Eepogi is able to win it, so those colonies got very equally and fair divided between all of the players, and Eepogi wins it for an army, so a bit of a prize, but autonomous of course being quite strong. Eepogi now having lots of actions, and let's see what he will take from the territory. He takes 6 food, interestingly, and that I think was an interesting moment here, because when I looked at it at my first recording, I for a moment was confused and thought, wait, he has the ocean liner, where is he taking the food? But of course the reason for that is coming down the road, and that is the red cross. Now that Eepogi took the food, he is at 11 plus 4 from the reserves at 15. So if Martar doesn't take the red cross here, Eepogi could just take and finish it, and that would give him a very big culture boost. And now that Martar missed out in the Air Forces, he is maybe also not in a position to punish Eepogi militarily, especially with Eepogi having the Himeji Castle. So Eepogi prepares himself nicely for the red cross here. Let's see if Martar will deny it, and he indeed will deny it, takes the reserves. I think for himself, just thinking about what points he gets from the Wonder, the space flight would have been quite a lot better for him, but he has to do this denial. Eepogi probably thought about this, probably was expecting this, but at least Martar has to do now a suboptimal play, and Eepogi can maybe still also go for something like spaceflight himself. But Martar maybe can finish the red cross and could still have a shot at getting the Empire State Building, for example, so maybe there's some hope for him that he will actually still get also another Wonder going. He takes the movies, reserves, can maybe score some additional culture with going for movies at his last 2 turns. Eepogi cedes, opens the vast territory, so the 4th colony already in a row. This time Plunderteig is able to win it again. Again, he has to pay a bit of a price. An Air Force is quite costly, but with his happy face issues, the 4 additional yellow tokens are of course also extremely helpful for him. Eepogi builds a step of the red cross from Martar, builds another opera, and the interesting wonder grabs are continuing. For Eepogi, maybe the easier and probably the wonder who gives him more points would be the space flight, because for the Empire State Building, Martar is occupying quite a bunch of potential slots like science production, resource production, so for Eepogi it's not that easily possible to score a lot for the Empire State Building. But again, that wonder pick might have to do a lot with denial. Probably both Martar and Eepogi at this point know that for Plunderteig it's very difficult to come back into the game. So with that, in regards of how valuable hate drafting it is, it maybe turns more into something like a 2-player game, and Martar willing to deny the red cross from Eepogi, now Eepogi willing to deny the Empire State Building from Martar, not knowing whether Plunderteig would be willing to go for that denial, and who knows, maybe Eepogi will find a way to actually score some points with that wonder himself. He then takes the democracy, which he can develop at the next turn, builds a warrior, then has 1 resource and 1 food corruption. The Empire State Building was the last wonder, so no more wonders that the players can take. Or actually, is there still the Hollywood left? No, Hollywood is also gone by now. Plunderteig builds another step of the Red Cross. He plays the military build-up, rebuilds the Air Force, and the rocket is now at 44 strength, and even builds another Air Force. With that, is putting a bit of pressure on his opponents. I thought maybe he will now take the military theory, potentially threatening a war. Actually, he will instead go for the endowment, the democracy, and the patriotism, which makes him less threatening for a war, but his opponents might still have to respond to him because he has to go for an aggression, and which I noticed when I recorded it for the first time, is also Eepogi has already a military theory, and Martar has the strategy, and he has lots of resources and probably lots of stuff that he wants to do, so the chance that he actually goes for denial is maybe not that high, so maybe there's not really a need of grabbing the military theory this turn, and Plunderteig not grabbing it doesn't necessarily mean that he isn't planning to potentially go for a war at the next turn. Sadly for him though, he is missing 1 resource to go for 2 rockets, and can actually go for 3. Maybe there's a chance that Churchill could be available for him, but chances are very high that he will be discarded. Only 1 out of those 2 cards has to be taken by Martar in order to be for that to be the case. And I mean, if Plunderteig has a war in hand, maybe he would go for Churchill here, so that could be an indicator, but it's actually already that long ago at the recording that I don't remember if he actually has a war or not, so we can be surprised again. Martar Seeds opens the impact of industry. When we take a look at the impacts, 2 were seeded by Martar, 1 by Plunderteig. Impact of industry looks like it could have been seeded by Martar. He finishes the red cross this turn for only 1 civil action with the engineering, plays the reserves for food with the Silk Road bonus. With that he can increase his population this turn, but also at the next turn he takes the tanks for 2 civil actions, develops them, and goes for some upgrades. Without the military pressure, maybe he could have started building some movies, but here he decides to react, doesn't want to be in danger of an aggression. Now maybe Eepogi could be the target of an aggression if he isn't willing to build up more strength. Eepogi seeds, and the impact revealed is the impact of variety, plus 14 for Martar, plus 18 for Eepogi, and plus 12 for Plunderteig. Interestingly, that was not seeded by Eepogi, so he probably was happy to see that impact revealed. He has another Air Force, increases population, builds a cavalryman, goes for the democracy, is at 41 strength, and with the Meiji Castle probably enough to defend himself against Plunderteig, takes some yellow cards, and and with that ends his turn. Also the age will now end, meaning the next round will be the last one, and let's see if Plunderteig will use his politics phase. Churchill is actually still around, and let's see if Plunderteig will go for a war or an aggression. And he doesn't go for any politics action, maybe just wanted to force out some responses, or maybe notices that a war just won't work and that both of his opponents can defend. He will go for the Churchill this turn, builds a religion, builds not a religion, gets a bit of culture production and also some more happy faces. The next turn can maybe go for democracy and endowment. Martar seats and the impact of government is revealed, which also turns out to be quite nice for Eepogi, another impact that he didn't put into the deck, probably it was seeded by Martar. He now goes for the movies, builds a movie, is now at 12 culture production, destroys a mine, builds another movie, upgrades a religion, maybe there's impact of architecture in or impact of happiness, and then he upgrades knight to tanks, is now at 53 strength, one strength stronger than Plunderteig, and that could potentially be very vital because there's one H2 event still left on top. That was seeded by Plunderteig, and with Plunderteig being willing to go for a big investment into the military, it could certainly be an indicator that that could be a strength event, and maybe the additional strength could now mean that Martar potentially wins the strength event. Eepogi is now the weakest, could get hit by something bad here. And probably he was very, very relieved to see that the event revealed is actually nothing bad, but even something good. A bit unfortunate for Martar, the economic progress being revealed after his last round. He won't be able to make any use out of the additional food and resource that he gains now. So instead of something potentially bad, there's actually the economic progress, which is now maybe giving Eepogi some additional options. He will increase his population 2 times, takes the modern infantry, developing that scores him 2 culture for the Colosseum. He could have potentially scored a little bit of points, I think, with the Empire State Building, but instead he goes for some impact preparation. He, I think, builds an additional farm that could help him for impact of harmony as well as impact of balance, and of course agriculture, so 3 impacts that get improved quite a bit by building the farm and upgrading it, and then he will increase his strength, meaning that now he is prepared for an impact of strength, and maybe he could have even seeded that himself into the deck. Plunderteig goes for the democracy, plays the endowment, plays the patriotism. He could potentially try to overtake Eepogi in strength, but instead he only builds 1 unit going up to 57. Indicating that he himself didn't put any impact of strength in there, but from now on there's also no impact seeded by Plunderteig left. The decision of going for an additional journalism instead of some additional units could have quite an effect on the outcome potentially, because when we take a look at the final culture, maybe we can see that Plunderteig is just too much behind, but between Eepogi and Martar it's close, and Eepogi actually still has the lead, so he managed to keep the lead, went for some operas with Marlene, but now he has to survive the impacts, and if there's indeed impact of strength in there, if Plunderteig maybe would have played around that, then it would have been only a 7-point swing. Now it could have been even a 14-point swing. So let's see if the impact of strength is in there, and potentially it even makes a difference on how Plunderteig plays the last turn. The first impact we see is impact of harmony. That one Eepogi prepared himself for with his last turn, and it also scores him plus 8 points against Martar. He has now a comfortable 20 points lead. There's also the impact of balance, which Eepogi prepared himself for with that farm as well, allowing Martar not to catch up. Then we have an impact of competition. Martar is getting 1 culture closer, but he needs now some really strong impacts in order to be able to come back. But there is actually the impact of strength. That one gives now Eepogi plus 14 against Martar, and with that there should be no impact left that allows Martar to overtake Eepogi. The last impact being the impact of science. Actually a nice one for Martar, but Plunderteig, while he didn't play around the impact of strength with building the additional journalism, he played around the impact of science, and that got rewarded for him, so he gets now some additional points. But the culture gap between Eepogi and Martar wouldn't have made a difference whether Plunderteig built the largest journalism or not. He would be last if he wouldn't have built a journalism, so he gets now plus 14 points, indicating that he made the right guess in maximizing his amount of points with the last impacts. And with that, at the end, Eepogi is actually able to win the game. Martar, at the end, even having a bit of, even there being a little bit of a culture gap between him and Eepogi. So Eepogi somehow managed, despite Martar having the strong economy, to stay in the game, had the ocean liner, managed to defend himself. Martar didn't have access to air forces, which maybe limited him a little bit. There was some interesting wonder denial going on between Martar and Eepogi. Eepogi not finishing the Empire State Building, Martar taking the Red Cross away from Eepogi. So that was definitely some interesting stuff. And with that, Eepogi is able to win, so congratulations to him. With that, also my guess at the end worked out quite nicely. Sadly, of course, I can't prove to you that that was actually my real guess that I did during my first recording, so you have to believe me on that. But I guessed it correctly, and actually it's the second three-player game that we take a look at. The second time that I guessed a three-player game, the second time that I guessed that one correctly. Of course, the three-player games maybe being a little bit easier to predict compared to the four-player games. So let's see if I can keep up that performance in my guessing. Alright, and with that, Eepogi scores some important points. I sadly don't have a screenshot, I think, after that specific game. That, of course, is now also quite a while ago, the finish of that game. Also, now, of course, some time has passed. So now that we are at the end of the video, maybe we can quickly talk about how I plan to continue. I don't know it exactly, but I think maybe even all, but at least some of the World Championship semifinal skill groups have already finished by now. But I was very careful in not getting spoiled, so I still don't know any outcome. Meaning I still plan on covering some of the games, definitely not all, that would be too much, but maybe still like 2 games of Group 1 and Group 3. And then we can take a look together at how this ends. I really hope that I still manage to avoid any spoilers, and then we can take a look at some more games from the World Championship semifinals. So that is what is coming next. You will still hear that my voice is not perfectly prepared yet for recording videos again. So the World Championship review videos being a bit shorter also is maybe an advantage for that. Alright, then I hope it was an interesting game for you. I hope it wasn't too bad that sadly I had to interrupt myself during the video, and then I hopefully still covered the ending in an exciting way, even though I already knew the outcome at the end. And so then thanks for watching, have a nice time, and see you in the next video.